Okay.
It is the same with my people, the shepherd said gently. They too must be threshed and ground into the finest powder so they can become like bread for others. It is a painful process. After this, the shepherd took her back to the central room, and they climbed the spiral staircase. There on the second floor was another small room. In the center was a man making pottery. He was working with soft clay upon a potter's wheel, making a beautiful bowl. As they watched, the shepherd said, I work with my people as though they are clay. I mold and shape them to be like beautiful vessels. I want to do that with you, much afraid. I want you to be clay in my hands. Last of all, he took her up the stairway to the highest floor. There they found a room with a furnace in which gold was being refined. The gold was heated until it was very, very hot. Everything inside the gold that was not good flowed to the top and was removed, so that all that was left was pure gold. As Much Afraid stood fearfully looking at the fire, the shepherd smiled and said, My rarest jewels, my finest gold, are those who have gone through the fire. Then he took her hand in his and continued, So don't be surprised when you are tested by a fiery trial. Rejoice and be happy. Rejoice and be happy. The words echoed in her mind as Much Afraid walked back down the staircase, still holding the shepherd's hand. Then she remembered some other words she had read once in the great book. He knows the way I take. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as pure gold. The words were comforting, and as she spoke over them and over in her heart, they stayed in the desert huts for several days. Time was spent resting and restocking their supply of food and water. On the last morning, Much Afraid made a lovely discovery as she went out for a walk. Behind one of the huts was an old pipe connected to a water tank. In the pipe was a tiny hole, from which drops of water fell one by one. At the place where they landed was the first growing thing she had ever seen in the desert. It was a beautiful little golden flower. Much afraid knelt closely to it and asked softly, What is your name, lovely flower? The tiny plant seemed to answer at once with a voice as golden as itself. I am Acceptance with Joy. Much Afraid thought of the things that she had seen in the pyramid, the threshing floor, the potter's wheel, and the fiery furnace. The words of the little golden flower echoed in her mind as she said to herself, I too want to be Acceptance with Joy. Whatever he lets me go through, I want to trust him and allow him to have his way with my life. And I want to do it with joy in my heart. Then she stooped down and picked up a pebble that was lying in the sand beside the flower and put it into her little bag with the first altar stone. So now we're going to go through the think about it questions. I'm going to say them and then I'll unmute you and then we'll have class discussion. Think about grain being ground into flour, clay on the potter's wheel, the furnace purifying gold. None of these sound like much fun, do they? What does acceptance with joy mean? Every time we feel pressure and the heat is being turned up on our lives, God wants us to accept happily the trials we go through. The opposite is murmuring and complaining. Do you ever do that? When something goes wrong, do you say, oh man, why did this have to happen? Or do you say, I don't understand why this happened, but I trust you, Jesus? It is much easier to murmur and complain. So we certainly need to be God's help to become acceptance with joy.